Welcome in, everybody. It's time for Wanna Bet, the audio version on TKR and Spotify. Wherever you're catching the program this week, we are so glad you're on board and really appreciate your support throughout the entire football season. I'm really glad to say that this has been a very great project for both myself and my son, the brilliantly talented and very successful writer and prognosticator of all things football, Kip Keefer out in Las Vegas. We have had a blast putting this series together all season long, and this is a strange week because really there are no games to talk about. And of course, anyone who's listened to the program knows that's been our main focus, trying to give you winners week after week. We are going to resume that pattern, of course, with our finale for the season next week. You cannot miss the program because Case and I are going to talk about all things Super Bowl, different ways to bet it, different ways to approach it, and we're going to tackle as many of the interesting and potentially profitable prop bets. And I know a lot of you listening all around the country in different spots don't have direct access in some cases to those particular types of wagers. But if you have any friends in Las Vegas or anyone traveling out there for the Super Bowl, if you like what you hear next week and you hear a couple of prop bets that may be of interest to you, perhaps you can find a way with someone living in a jurisdiction that can get that action in, or anybody who offers the opportunity to bet those wherever you might be. Hopefully there'll be some good information that will tweak your curiosity enough to try and find a way to get down with those. But just for the exercise of it being highly entertaining and fun, we're going to tackle the prop bets and try to find the best values and some winners that look intriguing. If you're not really familiar with the concept of prop bets, I'd urge you to tune in because, man, they get creative on bets on that game, on different statistical things. There's even crossover sports. For example, if the Lakers are playing that day, there might be a prop bet of who will score more points, the Kansas City Chiefs or LeBron James. Bets like that really are brain teasers, and a lot of times you can find some really good values in those statistical kind of plays. Most of them, of course, are over-unders on how many yards an individual player will have. I know one that Case has had a lot of success with is who will score the first touchdown in the game, whether you pick the team or the individual player, and you get odds on all of those plays, of course. If you pick somebody obscure and they score the first touchdown, a lot of times those odds might be 20 or 25 to 1. So really intriguing stuff, so don't miss the show next week here as we tackle the Super Bowl on the season finale of Wanna Bet. Today, to kind of capitalize on the theme of the whole season, we spent a lot of time in the early weeks talking about futures bets, and I think you all heard a recurring theme here. A lot of the information that Case gave out early season and what he calls his betting pet portfolio, and that's an important term to think about because the way he approaches it, this isn't just week-to-week betting on football games. This is long-term investment strategies, focusing on football as the marketplace and looking for great values for the investment of funds to come back and really pay big dividends in the event that he's correct. And he's done a lot of things along with those and explained it throughout the series. And if you've missed a lot of episodes, we have lots of places that you can find it. We have a YouTube channel for Wanna Bet, and also on our Facebook Wanna Bet page, we've got the entire season of shows sequentially posted there for you. So you can go back and catch a lot of the episodes if you're just now discovering the show. Also on Tony Kurre Radio, they're archived, so you can go back and listen to the audio versions. there's plenty of places to catch the show. And again, I'm really proud of the content that we've delivered and the subject matters that we've tackled. It has been great information. Case early on in the year said that one of his best bets of the year was the value on picking a couple of different Heisman Trophy candidates. I remember he had a couple of the receivers for Ohio State, actually a running back and a receiver for Ohio State. Unfortunately, injuries curtailed both of their chances. But on that same program, he also gave out Caleb Williams, who was transferring, of course, from Oklahoma to USC. His odds was 16-1 to win the Heisman Trophy. Case jumped on that and laughed all the way to the bank on Heisman Trophy presentation night when Caleb Williams did indeed win the award. He also cashed in big this past weekend with his preseason bet on the Philadelphia Eagles at 14-1 to win the NFC Championship and go to the Super Bowl. And another big score on that one. Case having a very good year with all of his futures. And if you listen to a lot of those shows, it's a really intriguing way to look at upcoming seasons, get bets in advance. And of course, I think the biggest message from the Case Keefer lessons on this show was the dynamic of getting the lines right when they come out, look for disparities, and bet early before the market adjusts. His point always all year was that the best information, the best time is to strike while the iron's hot, and some of those lines might be off because, as he very thoroughly explained, the market corrects itself as the week goes on. The casinos start to get more in line with one another in terms of the betting trends, not just in Las Vegas, but all around the world. This is a global enterprise now. And getting in plays that you think are going to change early in the week is a great key to success, and it's something that he takes big advantage of each and every week. So with that being said, my specialty has been on the SEC. So in the third segment here, we're going to have my report on kind of my grade for 2022 SEC teams and a look ahead at maybe some of the values if you happen to make it out to Vegas this spring or summer, or again, you have some resources that you can tap into those markets. I'm going to give you a couple of SEC teams that I think are going to have pretty desirable lines as far as winning the national championship in 2023. We know early Georgia is a 3-1 favorite. That doesn't seem to be great value. That's pretty chalky as far as your return. Some of the others, Alabama at 7-1, may be more desirable way to go this year, taking advantage of the highest odds they've been in a number of years. But the real trend to think about in that particular discussion is the SEC has won 14 of the last 19 national championships. Think about that. 14 out of 19. So identifying a couple of the SEC teams that we think may have a chance to get to the national championship game and win it in 2023 is a great way to go. And again, if you can access some futures plays, I think it's been proven by this series that that's a heck of a strong strategy to utilize. You get some great values. And again, think of this football betting as more of an investment opportunity, just like playing various markets, because the market sets the prices, and the people that are most savvy in recognizing disparities or inconsistencies or just being strong in their opinions are the ones who usually come out the big winners at season's end. We've got a surprise for you. I think it was one of our best discussion segments of the year. It took place at Treasure Island, our set there at the Golden Circle Race and Sportsbook, right on the Las Vegas Strip. And Case gave some really good information that, in case you missed it, I'm glad you're going to have an opportunity to hear it again. That's what we're going to have coming up for you next here, as he discusses some of the inner workings and the way the process of betting lines and a whole week kind of unfolds leading up to kickoffs on the weekend in Las Vegas. So enjoy that segment. We'll have that for you when we come back. And then I'll have the SEC futures and another promo on what's coming up next Sunday when we look at the Super Bowl. This is Kip Keefer, and you're tuned to Wanna Bet on TKR. Welcome to Las Vegas, everybody. Kip Keefer, Case Keefer with you for another edition of Wanna Bet right off the Vegas Strip at the fabulous TI Treasure Island Resort. We are in the Golden Circle Race and Sportsbook, a place you definitely need to check out next time that you're out this way. Case, we've been having a lot of fun talking about different aspects of the new football season. We're still in the early stages, but last week we spent a lot of time talking about the definition and just the actuality of what a betting line is. I want to get into more of your kind of routine with lines. I imagine for being a kind of a serious sports analyst and bettor, you write a column every week. You cover every single college game. We'll get into that a little bit later in the series here. But I want to talk about your process every week. It's kind of a de facto, a little bit of a Christmas morning every week. When do you start that process of looking at those new sets of lines for both college and pro football? And just kind of walk us through your process.
Yeah, I think that's such an important thing. A lot of sports betting content is just picks, because that's what people want, but that's really not going to sustain over the long term. I think, to be a winning bettor, you need to have that process down pat, find what works for you, find a way to quantify your opinion to make it work. And I think on past episodes I've said the same thing, so I might be like a broken record, but I think the biggest way that you can improve your betting performance is if you realize you have an edge, you realize you do some things hard, you want to bet early. So I think there really can be almost no off time. You want to be betting into these lines as soon as you can, where you find differences on what you believe and what they believe. So for me, it never really ends. I try to do things as early as possible. I cover the NFL, so it's kind of hard on Sundays. The college football lines come out on Sundays usually. It's hard for me to bet right into them during an NFL game, and sometimes I'm on the road. So usually it's not on Sunday for me, but usually the very next morning, on Monday morning, I'm diving into hopefully every single college football game. I'm trying to look back at what happened last week of the games I didn't catch or didn't get to look at the box score. I'm kind of surveying the market, see where the early moves have come at the sharper sports books, who's been bet on, and kind of trying to formulate those opinions. So I go through every single college game on Monday. I have a pretty good handle. I'd say at this point, 80 or 90% of my action is done by Monday. There is some stuff I'm still monitoring. In the NFL, it's a lot the same way. The NFL, I actually do try to start Sunday. A lot of times it's late at night after the NFL games. I have a really good handle, though, on the NFL. Of course, it's fewer teams. So I try to set my own numbers by the end of the NFL games that week. And I'm trying to bet in as close to the NFL openers as possible. There's different ways. There's a lot of different ways you can do things. But to me, and I think for recreational gamblers, the best thing to do is just try to attack at these early. That's where you're going to find the softer lines. That's where you're going to find the better values. For me, I always did it a little early, but over the years, as sports betting has become bigger, as more money's come in, I think it's just gone earlier and earlier. And for me, by now, the vast majority of my football action is in by Monday night.
Here's a chicken or egg question. You mentioned that you formulate a number on the games. Do you do that first before you look at the lines, or the other way around?
Well, it depends. Early in the season, I think for sure, I have more. There's more way to quantify exactly and have time to put that into a number and move it. It's kind of an inexact science once we get later in the year. It's hard to run everything, update all the numbers, especially in college football, 130 teams.
Wow.
I think by then, you have a little more handle on where teams are. You try to get injury updates. So, I'm not a guy that's a computer whiz. I don't have my own model. The guys that are betting at the highest level have their own models, where they're inputting stuff constantly. That's spitting out a number. I'm still kind of feel like I'm in between the old school and the new school. I'm very analytical. There's a lot of power ratings that I do use. But, at the end of the day, it does kind of come down to putting my own number on it, to trying to put all that information together. And a lot of times, I think the value of betting early and kind of having an idea of where your numbers are going to be is more beneficial than waiting later in the week, where I can get an exact number and a lot of the value is already going to be flushed out of the market.
We're going to take a quick detour here because Case mentioned he's on the road a lot.
Real quick, this is real insider information. Who's got the best spread in the press box for the media?
Well, I haven't been to every NFL stadium, but I got to say so far, and I've heard this it's Jerry World down at the Cowboys Stadium. I did go. The Raiders did have the Thanksgiving game there last year, so I got a little spoiled with that, but I've heard they spared no expense. And let me tell you, there are a lot of other teams in the NFL, not naming any names, that do spare expenses. So Dallas, certainly not. That would be probably the number one.
See, we give you the real good stuff here. That's a question I've been dying to ask. So back to the betting line process. So, you mentioned, so it may be as early as even Monday that you might make your first bet of the week?
Oh, yeah. For NFL, I'm usually a bet. I'd say it depends on the week, but it'd be very rare that I haven't bet at least one game by Sunday night if I'm in town. Usually even 3 or 4. I just see some lines that are off. They're really exploitable early in the week because, as the week goes on, most of these sports books are going to come together and have about the same numbers. You're only going to see very little differences. Early in the week when they've taken different money, you're going to see some different. In college football, I'm basically done by Monday. I think it's really important. Like I said, you want to bet into the numbers before all these opinions of people that have a lot more resources than you do. I'm thinking most people watching this are probably more recreational. I want to beat that money, and I want to try to get in my own positions before they have a chance to kind of shape the market in their image, so to speak.
So what you're basically talking about is kind of shopping the numbers that a large group of different providers are offering. What's the vehicle to do that? Where do you go to access a list of all the different lines?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of odd screens online. I mean, you can just Google around and find them. I don't necessarily, one of the old famous ones was Vegas Insider. There's a good one now at Wager Talk. I will say, as an aside, I am totally opposed to pick selling. A lot of these sites with the good odd screens have pick selling. My number one advice to anyone is never buy any picks. Try to do the work yourself. It just makes the juice so much better. But that being said, some of these services do have great free odd screens. You can look at where the odds are. And there are subscription services that are worth taking where you can see the odd screens that update in real time. I think it's really important to be able to see where the market's moving, some of the bigger sports books. So Google around, you can find an odd screen. And really, if you're just getting started in this, I'd say one of the most important things to do, even beyond knowing the team, is understanding the market, understanding the technical aspects of when lines move, why they move. And you can really kind of figure that out just by looking at the odd screen, for a week or so and see how that works.
It's really fascinating. Do you remember a circumstance maybe from last season? Give us an example of a line that you would consider way off.
Yeah, that's a tough one. On a game-to-game, it's just so hard to have, once. I will say, this goes back to futures, which we already talked about at the beginning of the season, but I know I went on your own show, your radio show. I said Georgia 10-1 to win the national championship was ridiculous about a month before the season.
Yep.
That went down to, I think, 5 or 6 by the beginning of the year, but it just shows you the earlier you bet, there are going to be some discrepancies, some value you can find. Obviously, I cashed a nice ticket with the Bulldogs there.
Fascinating stuff. We'll find out who Case likes coming up next. Stay with us on Wanna Bet.
Welcome back, everybody, to Wanna Bet here on TKR and Spotify. We're glad you're on board. Hope you enjoyed the rerun of one of our best segments of the year, I thought, discussing just how the inner workings of Las Vegas operate in terms of establishing betting lines and how things unfold during the week. I thought it was some very good information and hope you enjoyed kind of that reset as we kind of put the program together on a strange week. Since there are no games, we are focusing on some of the things that we learned this year on the program and looking ahead to the Super Bowl next week in Phoenix, Glendale, Arizona specifically, as the AFC champion Kansas City Chiefs take on the Philadelphia Eagles, winners of the NFC. It is going to be a classic matchup, a great game. And again, if you missed the first segment, we are going to have a comprehensive show on the Super Bowl here on Wanna Bet next week. It'll be our season finale. Kip Keefer and I going over the Super Bowl upside down and sideways from all the different betting aspects and focusing on prop bets, which, again, the explanation on those, if you're not familiar, there are so many different wagerers available on the big game. A lot of them statistically oriented, who's going to score first, who's going to have the most yards, over-unders on individual players and their accomplishments, all the way down to the field goal kickers, and a lot of crossover bets. So it's very interesting. That'll be next week here on the show, and your enjoyment of the Super Bowl, I promise you, will be greatly enhanced if you tune into our show next week. I promised to talk a little bit about the SEC, and since that's my expertise, and I mentioned in the first segment that the league has won 14 of the last 19 national championships. So if we're going to look at futures bets going into 2023 and base them on the developments we've had in the coaching ranks and the transfer portal and other recruiting situations that are happening in the traditional recruiting world, this would be a good time to kind of look at some of those teams that I feel like from the SEC have a fighting chance at this stage, I would assume would be very good odds. I don't have the odds in front of me. I do know that Georgia is a 3-1 favorite to three-peat as national champions. That's a tough thing to accomplish, although Georgia's going to be loaded once again. But the price would have to be a little bit higher than 3-1 to get me to bite on that particular direction. Alabama, on the other hand, is 7-1 in the early betting, and that might not be a bad team to lock in. Nick Saban has not gone 3 consecutive years in his tenure at Alabama without winning a national championship, and he has never had back-to-back 2-loss seasons. I think Alabama with a much softer schedule next year, and here's the big key for Alabama. They are playing their 3 toughest games not on the road like last year when they were at Texas, at Tennessee, and at LSU. Those resulted in only 1 win in 3 tries. This year, all 3 of those teams, the Texas Longhorns, the Tennessee Volunteers, and LSU Tigers, come to Tuscaloosa and Bryant-Denny Stadium. So Alabama has a big leg up over last year just from a schedule standpoint. 7-1, pretty generous. If you plunk down a $100 bet on Alabama to win the national championship right now in Las Vegas, if they come through and accomplish that task, which we've seen plenty of times before, Alabama would pay you right now back for your $100 bet a $700 reward. I would say that's pretty good ROI, return on investment. Let's look at a couple of the other SEC teams. I don't think this is going to come as a big surprise, but Tennessee, who had the beating at Georgia that really kind of derailed them, but the game that was really killer was the one at South Carolina the next to last week of the regular season, where nobody saw that coming. Tennessee had bounced back after the loss to Georgia and was still well positioned for a possible playoff berth, having only lost to the number 1 team in the country on the road, and not by a devastating score, 27-13, although Georgia had a bigger lead early in the game and it got closer than the final score may have indicated. But the bottom line is, the Volunteers had that stumble at South Carolina that nobody saw coming, and really is kind of inexplicable to this day. South Carolina, of course, going crazy for 2 straight weeks, knocking 2 major playoff contenders right out of the box, both Tennessee and Clemson, who they beat in successive weeks. The Clemson win was at Clemson, where the Tigers had won 40 games in a row, Tennessee breaking that streak and knocking Dabo Swinney out of contention. So Tennessee is another team to keep a close eye on this year. Yes, Hendon Hooker, their quarterback, is gone. Yes, Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt, their great receivers, have moved on to the NFL, but they've still got a very strong core group, and Joe Milton showed at the end of the season and in the Orange Bowl that he is quite a capable quarterback with a very strong arm. Tennessee likely right now available at anywhere from 10 to 15 to 1, maybe a good team to lock in your futures portfolio because the Big Orange looks like they're back. Josh Heupel just signing a big extension through 2029 and commanding the same kind of salaries as the highest paid coaches in the SEC, namely Nick Saban, of course, Jimbo Fisher, Brian Kelly, and Kirby Smart. So it's a very interesting revival happening at Tennessee. And if you can get a good price on them in the futures market right now, they're a good team to jump on. One team I'm sure that's going to be a very inflated, both these next two that I'm going to give you, will be very high odds, which give you good opportunity if they're 18 or 20 to 1 or even more. The way South Carolina finished and what Shane Beamer is building there is pretty impressive. And while they're certainly a vast dark horse to win the national championship, their quarterback Spencer Rattler is returning. They've had a great recruiting season. It may not take a very high bet if they're 20 to 1 or more. Locking in a $50 or $100 bet on that could really bring you some major dividends. South Carolina is a team to keep your eye on. Shane Beamer, I think, is one of the upcoming coaching superstars in the country. He has gotten more out of having less than any coach I can think of in the country in the last couple of years. And their spectacular finish, of course, that didn't include their bowl game against Notre Dame, but that was a bad matchup for them as it turned out because South Carolina a little thin on defense in terms of depth, and Notre Dame had a huge offensive line and figured out at halftime that just pounding the ball straight ahead was going to be the ticket to success. They really just wore the Gamecocks down as the game went on, but it takes nothing away from the spectacular wins against Tennessee and Clemson at the end of the year. So the Gamecocks are an interesting team to look at. Of course, the other real dark horse is Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin now secure with a big contract. I should have mentioned him in the big money winners in SEC coaching ranks. Ole Miss finished the season dismally with 4 straight losses and a bad performance in their bowl game against Texas Tech. But I don't know if a lot of folks noticed, but Lane Kiffin pulled off a quarterback daily double in consecutive days out of the transfer portal. He grabbed a very highly touted quarterback, a freshman 5-star at LSU, and the very next day topped that off by getting Spencer Sanders, a 4-year starter and former Big 12 Player of the Year from Oklahoma State. So he's got the quarterback in waiting in Walker, and he also has the big time quarterback that's had wealth of experience in Spencer Sanders, and the quarterback in college football is the key position. So watch out for Ole Miss. I'm sure right now you can probably get them at closer to 30 to 1 if you wanted to plunk down a little bit of an investment. And of course, I can't leave LSU out of the mix. Brian Kelly did a phenomenal job. He's going to have basically his full team back, including quarterback Jaden Daniels. I'm sure they're in that same range with Tennessee at 10 or 12 to 1, but another SEC team that might be a good futures bet moving forward. As mentioned, next week we have the Super Bowl preview, all the betting angles and the prop bets. And we once again want to thank you sincerely for all your support and attention this year on Wanna Bet. It's been great having this show, and we don't want you to miss the season finale next week as Case and I get together for a full discussion on everything Super Bowl. San Francisco is eliminated by Philadelphia, and of course the Bengals fall by the wayside to Kansas City. So we've got the Chiefs and the Eagles in Phoenix next week, and it's going to be great. We're going to have a complete preview for you that you just can't afford to miss. So tune in right here on TKR and Spotify for Wanna Bet next week. We'll see you then.